I'm Kat Trader. I'm the moderator for this happy panel, and that's really all I have to say about myself. So please tell us who you are and why you're here.
My name is Chris Swenson. I'm the film program coordinator for the Seattle Office of Film and Music, and I'm on the pre-production panel to help out with logistics and kind of our perspective and what will help create the setting for a successful shoot on the nuts and bolts end.
I'm Jennifer Roth. I'm an independent line producer. I'm here because this is what I do for a living. I do production on film. I think everything else they're telling you about is I mean, honestly, I don't know how anybody does it. Like the first time I sat on the panel, I'm going to give a long thing. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's what
Like because I thought of this just as I was getting my water. The first time I sat on a panel in Seattle, somebody said, you know, there's 3 parts to making a film, and there's raising the money, there's doing the production, and then there's selling your film and getting out in the world. The first 2 are almost impossible. The second, like pre-production, production, and post-production, monkeys can do it. I mean, you might not have a very good movie, but really, you could give monkeys cameras, you could give them editing equipment. They could probably make something. Like anybody can do it, but it's a question of doing it well, and I do it extremely well, and so hopefully, and I feel like everything good that happens in production happens in pre-production, and of course, editing is no good if your production's no good. So this is the most important piece of making a film. I have no idea how to raise money, absolutely no idea how to distribute a film, but I do know a lot about production, so I'm in the right place.
I'm Chris Compte. I am with the newly merged SAG-AFTRA, which is the labor union that represents performing artists in the film and television industry, among other things. So I'm here to represent the performer's perspective in this process, and also the union perspective. Eventually, some of you, hopefully, if you progress in this, will want to use union performers, and so I'm here to at least give you some of the nuts and bolts about how that is possible, and what that means for your production in terms of budgeting, overall scope, and just again the logistics of how you get the best performers that you need to make your production as successful as possible.
Nice. So before we actually get to the questions and panel talk and all that, I'm going to ask you guys the logistic question of, would we rather have a little bit stuffier and no noise with the door shut, or the occasional woo from downstairs and the door open?
Door open.
Air.
That was my thought.
Yeah.
Excellent. Awesome. So now we can move on to our topics. So the topics that top the board today are planning within constraints. I'm assuming budgetary, but I think we can probably extrapolate to all the other ones that will affect. Finding the right team, and financial planning. So does anybody have a specific question around one of those 3 topics that you have, or should we just let them start talking?
Can you say them again?
Planning within constraints, finding the right team, and financial planning.
Start talking.
Start.
How many of you want to be directors? How many? What the rest of you want to do? Producers?
Actor.
Actor, producer.
Sound? You're onto something. Okay.
Let's start with finding the right team. How do you get the right people to do the right jobs?
The first question is, who are you? Why are you going to attract good people? What have you got going for yourself? People call me up all the time and say like, oh, you know, I want you to line produce my movie. I'm like, well, who are you? And what do you got to show me? Well, I've done a short. Okay, done a short. I see your short. What awards have you won? What recognition have you gotten? Like, I mean, people start at various levels. If you're going to direct, please don't produce it yourself. Please find a producer. Like, because you do not have enough time or energy to do that. If you're really just starting out and you're learning, the number one most important thing about directing is knowing how to work with actors. So if you have no I get films people all the time and they're like, there's no dialogue. It's just like voiceover and music and people wandering around, and it's a very pretty collection of photos. And I think that's and images, and I think it's interesting. But it shows me. And then they have this 100-page script actors acting. It's like, well, why would I think you know how to do that? You haven't given me any indication. So, you know, and I think, you know, the good news about the current technology is anybody can direct, but the bad news is anybody can direct. So you need to know what you're doing, and if you're just learning, then, you know, follow some sort of film school model, you know. Find another director, and you produce for him or her, and she produces for you, you know, and then, you know, you switch, and you guys learn, and, or take classes, meet people, build a community. So that's the very sort of basic, but I mean, because if you're somebody, you probably are gonna know who the good team is. Once you get to a certain level, you're probably gonna know who the good team is, and how you're gonna interact.
I think I would just add on to that just real briefly. I'm a big believer in a cross-training, particularly when you're just starting out, because it's really important to know what the other people in the whole sort of hierarchy of the project scope, what they do, how they do it, what kind of a language do they speak. Learning how to speak that language is crucial because, particularly if you are planning on being a director, you're going to have to interface with all of these people. And if everybody's speaking a different language and nobody understands each other, your project is doomed. So you know, when you're first starting out, you know, doing a little bit of producing, doing some directing, even doing some you know, some of the line tech work in terms of doing sound, as much of it as possible. That gives you an idea about A, what you're really good at, and B, where your interest really lies. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, I want to do this, but then when they get into actually sort of the nuts and bolts, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea that this is what I was going to be dealing with, and I don't really want to do this. Or you find something and you just go, wow, I really like this better than what I thought I would, and so you gravitate towards that. But at a certain point in time, as you develop through your career, you're going to have to make those choices in terms of what you really want to do. And once you've done that, once you've identified the area of your interest and your expertise and your specialty, then that's when you have to start looking for those other people who are also doing that in the other areas of production in terms of trying to put together the best possible team. Because again, as you say, trying to do all of it yourself is a recipe for failure, no matter what level you're doing that.
Okay. I think you actually were earlier, so go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I just, I was kind of surprised to see how many votes this topic got. I've only been working on movies for a couple of years, but you find the right team. Just every project, you sort people into two categories: people you want to work with again, people you never want to work with again. And finding the right team, like, even after just a short while, you'll know who the right team is because you've already worked with them. It's like you just get out there and work on stuff. That's it.
Yeah.
You'll find them. It'll
You're
be
absolutely right.
obvious.
You learn an enormous amount by doing the wrong thing. So don't be afraid to, like, if you get a bad feeling, it doesn't seem right. I would hope not the time that you're directing and putting your life savings into a film, that's the time that you learn these things. But you know, you do learn a lot by doing the wrong thing and realizing, wow, that is something I never want to repeat. I mean, it's the best. You know. There were other.
Yeah. This sort of in response to your statement, probably a very obvious one: if you want to direct, don't produce. Not entirely sure how relatable my situation is, but I'm coming from a two-person production team where we do everything.
Okay.
And that's the only way. That
You have a certain amount of experience already, and you've got a method that works.
Well, it's funny because the sample short that you described pretty much exactly describes that.
That's
short.
what you guys do. Do you ever?
That's what we've done.
That's what you've done. Do you have an intention in directing actors?
Yes.
Have you directed theater? Have you directed any? I mean, I would consider some of that first.
Well, I'm more interested in just like what anyone's perspective would be on kind of scaling up, because I know we're going to need to delegate. We're going to need more people. We're going to need role distribution, and I guess like speaking to the topic of like of finding that team and like scaling up from. We've been able to produce very limited things with our like very amorphous kind of blended setup, but.
Well, I mean, I guess one thing would be, is it possible for the two of you to figure out a way to work on someone else's film? Is that a possibility? See
Yeah,
how it's
and
done?
we have.
Yeah, I mean, that, you know, and to see what works and what doesn't work. But I would just, I just wouldn't, I've been in, on multi-million-dollar films with people who really don't know how to direct actors, and it's very sad. And it's, cause once you lose the actor's trust, you may as well, it's a house of cards, like it's just, you know, the entire crew, just, nobody likes you, you're there, I don't know, you know, it's just so sad to watch, and it's like trying to, and my job is trying to get people to rally for these directors, and they're.
So that kind of leads to a second angle of direction, which is if you're the director and you need to work with the actors, that implies that you're not necessarily, that at this level, the director kind of has to do all sorts of things. They have to, you know, do the casting, and they have to do the direction of the actors, and they actually have to tell the DP what to do if they're not already being the DP.
Yeah.
So at the lower indie levels, you know, the low, no budget, how does that affect the trying to suck in talent to do your sound or to do your DP so that you don't have to do it yourself?
Such a good question.
I look at it from the perspective of who is really driving the project. Like in theater, a lot of times it's usually either a playwright or a director. In film, it's usually either a screenwriter or a director. Usually a director. There's a lot of sort of sense of ownership that people have over their projects, which is understandable. But that can sometimes translate into a sort of a micromanagement scenario where this person is so emotionally invested in what they're doing that they don't let go of anything. And that's where you start running into trouble. Like you say, when you're trying to wear too many hats, eventually you're either piling one on top of the other, and they just eventually, you know, they fall off your head. So if you are not able to let go in some respects and allow somebody else to do some of this work, you're gonna have a lot of problems. So you're better off, and that's part of what the pre-production phase is all about, is trying to, again, put together a group of people who are gonna share the vision of the person who is driving the project, who are gonna support it, and who are going to eventually help bring that to reality. And so even at the lowest, you know, rungs, if you're just starting out, even if it's your first project, trying to get as many people on board to assist you with that, because, you know, everybody goes into a project thinking that they're all on the same side. But what can happen is if you're being too controlling about the project, then again, like you say, it's like if it's a director who doesn't know how to rehearse actors or how to deal with them on camera, you start losing people. And once that starts sliding down the slope, you know, then you're losing your project. And so I think it's really important, even in the beginning, to try to get as many people on board as you possibly can, and just learn to let go of some of it. Trust the people that you're working with to do their job.
Delegate and trust your
I had a comment and also a question. So as far as finding crew, Seattle also has, like, there's a directory online, the Office of Film and Music has that. And Women in Film also has a membership directory, and it's vetted a little bit. I don't know if they vet the other one. But my question is, when I've hired DPs in the past, I typically ask them to recommend gaffers and people that they like to work with. And I was just wondering what you thought about that. Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the relationships. The same way with the
Okay.
production designer, we have a relationship with the prop master, set decorators. I mean, it depends on the scope of the film. I mean, on some level, I feel somewhat ill-prepared to talk about micro-budget films. The only micro-budget film I've ever worked on was Lynn Shelton's Your Sister, Sister. You know, we had an A-list actress, so it was sort of like, we had the A-list doing this movie because we had Emily Blood, we had Mark, we had Rosemary. It was like, and we were, and you know, it was $100,000. It was a crew of 16. I mean, with cast as well. I mean, and in one location, we were all living in the same house. I mean, I was on the production team. I mostly cooked dinner. Like, you know, but I wanted to do that film so I could see how it's done. But obviously, when you start with Lynn Shelton, that's not, you all should have such problems, you know?
And Tim's group have been working together. I'm sure that all 16
Yeah.
on the crew had been working together
I
for
was
3 or
there.
4 years.
I was
And then not only letting your keys, offer or delegate or hire the people who are working under them. Let them, if you're unfamiliar with other crew, let them recommend somebody they've worked with who might be another key who can also assemble their own team.
I find that, and I think Chris could speak to this as well, I think that there's an enormous emphasis placed on cinematography and not nearly enough emphasis placed on production design. It's another thing when people are starting out. The DP is only as good as his or her sets and lights. I mean, so people always think about the cameras and the lights and the movement, but like the sets it's so important, and to have someone who actually knows what that means and realistically can achieve sets that are gonna be great and great looking, and I just think I mean, that's apropos.
Got one in the back.
So, for someone like a first-time writer-director looking to do a short and out there scouring for producers, what are the big red flags that you would say to watch out for when you're interviewing people for that? Because there's a lot of people in Seattle who would be willing to. What's a good sort of short list of ask these questions and look out for these red flags, if that's specific enough?
Well, I mean, again, speaking purely as a producer who has no interest at all in directing, why are they going to be attracted to you? I mean, if they're like, and what have you got to offer? And show a little humility, like, why would that person, if someone is like, oh my God, it's going to be great, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, like, maybe they're crazy. But, or maybe, the film school model obviously is like, I produce for you, you produce for me, and maybe that's the, maybe you do both projects at once, and you get the same team, and you do them back to back, and, something like that. I mean, and then that person's gonna care because you're working together, and you're getting into a relationship. But I don't know. I mean, I suppose you gotta temper their experience with their enthusiasm. And the largest mistake that everybody makes, I've made this mistake, is to not renew each other references. I mean, and to read, and this is Seattle, so nobody ever says what they mean. So I'm from the Midwest, but I spent 20 years in New York before moving here, and I still kind of live in New York. Well, I met her and I really liked her. I like her too. That's not the same thing as like, oh my God, he's amazing and he's gonna you can tell, a lot of people don't want to say mean things about people because they're nice, and they don't want to be rude, and it might get back to them and it's bad karma. But read between the lines, and if someone else does something, just listen. And if that's the best person you can get, sometimes you really want it to sound better than it is. And just be aware of that. Like, take the time to really find the right person moving forward, and make sure that they're checking references, particular producers, because it's really easy to look at the film guide and say like, oh, that person knows what they're doing because they're in the film guide. It's like,
Being a producer, director, actor myself, I guess it's kind of two parts. What would be the next step? Like, what would your team look like? Who are the people you need to add in each level, every time you level up? And then, how much would you pay a producer? Because, I do it myself. I'm funding the project, so I have no idea what a ballpark range would be for an indie film for a producer.
well, it depends on the budget of the film.
Is there a percentage, or?
There's union scale, which will make you very upset if I tell you that. So that's not what you're going to pay. If you're self-financing this, that's not really the concern. I think the more you can pay, the better person you're liable. Always with everything.
Right. But is that going to be more than the DP? Are you paying them more than the?
I think that you should pay the producer more than it. And the wage scales dictate that as well. when I budget a film, I just budgeted a film that was $20 million below the line, and my fee was higher than the DP's. So, and that's generally, unless it's a specific relationship in that person, but I've actually never worked on a film where my fee was lower than the DP's. So, yes, I think so, but, what if the DP is something, what if the DP comes to the cameras and she's got, she owns a light truck, and, it's like, right. And maybe the producer's never done it before. Experience should matter in that. Like, you can have a high, I would budget a high number, and then, but if somebody's really not of that level, why pay them all that money when it's saved that for something else? Maybe that producer's gonna need an assistant or an extra baby.
We're gonna go straight back with you.
So this is a really simple question. I'm been working with documentary filmmaking, and I'm a former photojournalist, and so I come from sort of that background. And I'm just curious as to if you could say in sort of a short synopsis of what exactly does a producer do?
Okay, I feel like I'm just doing all the talking. Sorry. The first thing I do, I'm hired to write a business plan. So I write a budget. If the script is the creative document, then I write a business plan. I mean, I tell people who have no idea what I do that I'm like a general contractor, except we're building a museum, because, so let's say and in some cases we're building the EMP, and it's, you've got your crazy Paul Allen, and you've got crazy Frank Gehry, and you've got all these fancy egos, and, but my job is really not very interesting, my grips and electrics are like my cement pourers, and, so the first thing is I get the script, and then they tell me what number they want. Let's say the last one I did was $10 million. They wanted a budget for $10 million. And I say, okay, this is where we're gonna spend that money. And I can't really teach that. I taught it in my class. We went through the budget of the schedule of the wrestler, and I just taught how I did the wrestler and that business plan. That business plan is incredibly important. And it's really just creating a schedule, creating a budget. Numerous times with people who've done this before, like a lot, I've been in situations where they said, well, we really think we need to pay so-and-so $200,000. And I'm like, well, do you have a whole budget? Because let's say you're gonna pay that person $200,000. That's great. What's left? What's everybody else? I mean, Hollywood professionals, they didn't have a full budget. They were like, we just know we wanna pay this person that much. I'm like, all right, but I don't know what's left. So that's the main thing. And then once you have these documents, then it's really a question of, okay, in that document it says how much prep everybody has and when you should be hiring them, and then the other piece of my job is to find the team for the director.
And to do the hiring.
To work with the director to find the team, and then the majority of my job is to be the jerk, or the nice person. Like directors are, a director should really just be focused on the actors and the immediate people around the camera. So it's my job to say, oh wow, look at that, that electrician sweating because they're hanging the light, and there's whatever's going on in there's clearly making them all happy because they're high-fiving each other. I don't actually know what it is. And I pat them on the back and say, oh, that's really great, because the director's not gonna, they're too busy, And it's also my job to say like, let's see, you put in for a little bit too much overtime, I'm so sorry,
So the producer's the one guy who goes out and finds the funding.
Well, that's certain kinds of producers. That's not my kind of producer. Those are the people in development, and I have no idea how they do any of it. And I don't think anybody can tell you how to do it, because it's not if it were an exact science, we'd all be doing it.
And how does one go about becoming a producer?
Well, I worked my way up to the production office in production. I started as an office PA and became a coordinator and then production manager. That's how a lot of people come from the AD side, but you learn, a lot of people come through accounting, location work. Every once in a while a technician becomes a producer. But I'm specifically a line producer, different than a producer.
And I just want to add, just very quickly to this, in many ways, the budget is kind of a key component of your process, because without that, you're not going to get funders looking at your project. Because they want to know not just how much money you're planning to spend, but how you're going to spend it.
And then you know what you're talking about.
And then you know what you're talking about. As far as like, if you want to work under like a SAG-AFTRA contract to hire performers, first thing they're going to ask you for is, let's see your budget. Let's see how you're allocating your resources to see if you actually have the financial wherewithal to be able to pay those performers properly. So that, it's the one thing that in the artistic development process that no artist wants to do, which is why these people are so important, because they're the ones who are
That's
actually.
why we get paid more than you do.
Exactly, because it is really, it's the thankless job, but it's the one that if you don't have that duck in your row, your project is never
Investors aren't
go.
gonna be, I mean, whoever, even if the investors are complete clowns, they're probably gonna have an attorney that knows what they're talking about. And the attorney will be like, those people, these people know what they're doing, they don't have a decent business plan. And I've seen so many of these business plans, they're like, and this is what my big fat Greek wedding made, and this is how we're gonna make money. It's like, yeah, that's an investment, that's like a venture capitalist package, that's absolutely not, that means that, like, how are you gonna spend the money and, like.
So speaking to the business plans, and I think you gentlemen can probably also, are there resources that one can go to that has, models or examples or information about how things get programmed or how things get cast or, the scale wages and those sorts of things? What resources are there for a producer to build their business plan with?
Well, speaking from the performers union perspective, we have a complete package that's available for producers, and it's differentiated by basically what your budget level is. There are a number of scaled contracts that are available based on how much your production budget is, and within those you can go online to sagaftra.org, look under the theatrical contracts page, and it will map out, okay, here's what we're going to ask you for. There's a questionnaire that you fill out that's basically going to help us determine which contract is most appropriate for you. By providing that information to us, it gives you, at least in terms of that part of the process, a real good idea about what we would require from a producer in terms of that type of information. And so, I mean, it would be a good starting point to at least be able to lock down, okay, well, I'm gonna hire union actors, or maybe I'm gonna hire any actors, I mean, just as a sort of a boilerplate template, to be able to give you some ideas about what we would be looking for, which then are gonna inform you in terms of what you would need to build into your budget, for example.
I've read exactly one book on producing, and so I can recommend it. Christine Vachon wrote a book called Shoot to Kill, and I think it's a fantastic resource. I'm not a fan of the internet and the softwares. I have to use specific budgeting and scheduling software. It's Movie Magic budgeting and Movie Magic scheduling, but I think without really understanding the overall process, you may as well do it in Excel. Because you don't have the
Well, it would be like using project to schedule building a house. If you don't know all of the pieces that need to go into it, it's gonna be completely in Greek.
running with my analogy, fantastic. But also, the best thing to do is to just kind of immerse yourself in this community. And, I just yesterday, I had a lot of producers in New York that I'm friendly with say, I'm doing a budget, and it's based on the Black Swan budget, and I'm like, here's my budget. And he's like, really, thanks? I'm like, we have to share this stuff. Like, when people like it, I'm a big fan of just saying, like, here, just have this, and, have at it. It's not some sort of secret,
Along with that, just with sharing, the director Sally Potter has a website called Spark, and for her movie Orlando, she uploaded everything, her budgets, the script, the analysis, her book that she produced to go to funders. It's an amazing website, and a lot of universities are using it to teach this process to students.
What was the website address? Because it's not spark.com.
It might be like SP-ARK. You can just look up Sally Potter's archive, and you'll find it.
You had a question earlier, do you still? Okay. Rick, do you still have?
Sort of. I mean, it's sort of been answered, but I just wanted to kind of button the importance of incorporating the budget into your project, no matter what the size of it is, and why a line producer is specifically important to that. Because I see a lot of emerging filmmakers that are like, I'm doing a no budget production. It's like, you have to have a budget, even if it's not funded. You need to have. I just want you to kind of button that.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, no budget something. If you're talking about raising $10,000 to make a film, you can't afford a line producer. You have one person who's the entirety of production, and they're probably making snacks. So I would hire someone who makes good snacks. I mean, and it's funny. funny because your sister's budget, I said to the producer at one point, I said, I'd love to, when do I get to see this budget? Because and it was like basically written on the back of a paper bag. It's hilarious. It was just like, it was like 6 numbers. Like, this is what this cost. We negotiated this for the, But again, it was Lynn Shelton. You can call up the Rip House and say, we want this lighting back there. Like, yeah. And they all went for back end, and they all got paid.
So this is the pre-production seminar, and I just wanted to ask each of you, like, there are certain things you have to do in pre-production that I've seen, like, people in my sort of my acquaintances and colleagues, starting to crack the $10,000 range and get a little beyond that, and I've seen a couple of local productions just kind of fall apart during production, during shooting, and to me it seems due to mistakes made in pre-production. And so I was just wondering if 3 of you could just list off some essential steps that you have to take, regardless of budget, that are gonna head off those disasters once you've got everybody on set and cameras are rolling and money is flying out the window and being set on fire like crazy.
One of my favorite mantras is prep hard, shoot easy. The more work you put in, just like in any other aspect of anything you do day to day, the more work you can put in on the front end to make sure everything is set up well, the less of a chance it's going to implode during the actual production. As Jennifer talked about earlier, knowing your team and delegating and making sure everybody knows what their responsibilities are and making sure everybody's working on those responsibilities during pre-production is paramount. And one of the biggest things that young filmmakers and smaller productions overlook is locations preparation. And I say that kind of because I'm in the Seattle Film Office and we permit everything for local or for public property. And it will always fall apart. It never fails. It always falls apart if you don't do your work in advance on getting the location ready, making sure everybody knows where the location is, making sure everybody knows what the restrictions are to the location, and really kind of setting a good policy for that, whether it's in a house or in a soundstage or in a park or on a street. So those would be the first steps that I would say.
I mean, I would expand on that and say, like, long pre-production doesn't mean a long period of time to not make decisions. Make decisions. If you're a director, make decisions. The more decisions you make, the faster you make them, the better off your team is going to be. And if you're a producer, encourage your director to make decisions. If we don't cast an actor until the 11th hour, what's that actor wearing? Who's doing that? What's up with that actor's hair? What's up with that actor's makeup? Who's doing it? Are they comfortable with it? Like, what is that gonna? I mean, these are all important pieces in who the character is. And if you're casting people in the 11th hour, I mean, sure, of course, there's certain things that can't be decided, and you're just not happy, and you're just not happy, and you're not finding it. But finding a location early and saying like, oh yeah, this, then everyone can go and they can assess what the problems are. So that's like the biggest thing, because I get very luxurious pre-productions and the directors who just will not make decisions, and it's really frustrating. Because we're all just spinning our wheels because we can't move forward because we haven't locked in the cast, we haven't locked in the locations, we haven't locked in the color palette, we don't have locations, we can't lock in the color palette, so like what color are we painting the walls? We don't even have walls to paint. Like, it's just, we're all just sitting around like, why are we doing this?
It can also affect, I just got called literally yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I got a request to film on Monday in a city park, which is not uncommon, and sometimes we can turn it around that quickly, but the setup was substantial. They were bringing food truck and 20 actors and closing, wanted to reserve parking. They're filming the entire week, and it's a big budget TV commercial, and we had to say no because they didn't set it up in time. So that's an example of, even though your director or your creative team are having a hard time locking that down, whether it's a location or something else, you need to know the deadlines in advance and really know what the last minute move forward point is.
Yeah, and I would reiterate that actually works in the casting process too. Again, particularly when you're working with union performers, because part of that process is that you're gonna have to send us a list of those performers, because we have to check to see what their status is. Are they actually eligible and cleared to work if you're doing a project under a SAG-AFTRA contract? And
If they're not cleared to work, that means they haven't paid their dues, and if you hire them and work with them, your production is fined as a result of that, and they're not even allowed to work, but the
Technically,
worst
yeah.
case scenario is, I mean,
yeah,
my
you're gonna
case-
end up coughing up more money. But in any case, I mean, part of it is I mean, we need a certain amount of turnaround time on that. Locally, we try to do those things as quickly as possible, but if you're having to deal with somebody like, even if you're bringing somebody up from Los Angeles or something to do a project, we need to have time to be able to vet that performer. And if you call, which again, this happens frequently to me as well. I get a call at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and they say, hey, we've got a cast list, and here's 20 people we want to hire. The shooting starts on Monday. That's not really gonna happen. So again, it's crucial to make sure that you, as much as possible, of course, I mean, things happen. People drop out, they get other projects or whatever, and you have to sometimes scramble at the last minute to fill holes. That's understandable, but if you can plug as many of those holes as early as possible, then you're ahead of the game. The same thing, I think, speaking as somebody who has been an actor, if you have, and sometimes, a lot of times this is not a luxury that you have, but if you have any opportunity to rehearse with those actors before you get on set, you are so...
Or on set, if you have the location ready, you can
Yeah.
actually rehearse them on location, that's...
Before you sit up, because that is gonna help you so tremendously when you actually start rolling that camera. There is nothing, actors are used to spending a lot of time waiting around on set because that's just the way the process works. But what actors really hate is that if they feel like you're wasting their time. And if you're disorganized and you go on location and things aren't set up and the actor's call is at, 5 o'clock in the morning, and they come in and they do makeup and then they don't get called to set until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And you haven't, and you've shot like maybe 2 scenes in that entire time, and you scheduled, 8
That's what I'm
scenes to be
talking
shot
about.
that day.
Yeah.
That's where you start losing the goodwill of everybody in the process, not just the actors, because you got crew people who are standing around waiting for you, the director,
Yes.
to make a decision about how you want to do this, because they have to know what you want in order to know where light placements are, where the sound's going,
breakdowns have become a new thing, I mean, not a
Mhm.
new thing, but it's become a much more popular thing, which is that to sit down for the director and the team, the creative team, the DP, the production designer, more importantly, the production designer than the DP, and to go through the script and to talk about every little thing. And on the bigger movies, you have your ADs there, you have your costume designer, you have your prop master, you have everybody there talking about what exactly each piece of the script is, and who's
So,
responsible.
backing you guys up into the process, the business plan is obviously the overarching document that you use to establish, okay, your deadlines for things, your budgets for things, here's what's going to happen and when. But it sounds like the, locking down the location and your actors and all of those things, that sounds like a different communicative problem. So who does that communication and how should that look? Because obviously it's the miscommunication between what we're expecting and when we're expecting it and the preparation that is required for those things. How does one adequately communicate these decisions that are being made in the pre-production process to the people that they need to be disseminated to and get them moving on it?
Well,
It does.
Well, yeah, I think that's the scale of the project that you're doing is going to dictate that to a large extent.
That's my job, I have a whole staff
But-
beneath me that I would.
Yeah, I mean, if your budget is $10,000, obviously you're not probably going to have a line producer or an AD who you can delegate certain things in this to. So in a lot of cases, it's going to be you as the director, probably being directly involved in the casting process, for example. So you're going to have to find time out of your schedule when you're trying to plan everything else to sit down, for a day or 2 days or however long it takes to watch actors. And again, so that's something that you don't want to do 2 days before you start shooting your film. That's just one example. So, depending on what level you're working at, you probably are gonna have to take on more of those responsibilities because you're just not going to be able to delegate. Now, the great advantage of working like at a super, super low budget is nobody's making any money. Nobody's doing this for the money, everybody's doing it for free. So that actually kind of gives you a lot of luxury in terms of being able to build a larger team because everybody's a volunteer. And you shouldn't think that just because what you're doing is on a monetarily small scale, that it doesn't mean that you can't actually assemble a larger team. It actually gives you the advantage of being able to do that because nobody's getting any expectation out of it except for the fact that they're doing the project. So keep that in mind.
I'll go back to what Jennifer said earlier, maybe you can speak to this as well. Do whatever you can, whether you're a producer or a director, especially if you're a director, to get a producing partner. One of the hardest things to do, from my experience, and this is why I think you can speak to this, is to wear those two specific hats. You are, as a director, as a producer, Jennifer's job is to not let wage, overtime, or any other nuts and bolts, location problems, grip truck problems, or whatever, get to the director. The director is there to make the creative process keep moving. And vice versa, as a director, if you have to switch hats back into production mode, you're taking away from that creative process as well. So that would be my first step, no matter how big.
And as producer, you do end up becoming, once a director can trust you, then you do become very part of the creative process. I mean, the last film I did, I was very involved in every step of everything because he needed to bounce everything off of it. It's exhausting. But yeah, so it's even on the smallest level, I would think it's really important to have somebody do that. I mean, it sounds like you guys are in a good situation. You're a team of two, and you can do everything together. And I think directing teams are great that way, and I think that's the exception. I worked with a directing team last summer, and it was a bigger film, and they did not need a producer. They did not need an Uber producer. They needed a line producer.
When you say Uber producer, what do you mean by that?
I mean somebody who's going to sit next to you on set and say, like, I think we need another take. Somebody who's going to say, like, I think this actress would be better than that actress. I think that
So, like,
you rewrote it. You really like to rewrite. I think this film I did last summer had two writers who were next door neighbors, and they decided to adapt Henry James' What Amazing New into modern day, and 16 years ago. And one writer was a real writer, the other was just his neighbor, who said she was a writer. And when he got a look at her writing, he hated it. Now, her side is very different, but he just wrote the whole thing, immediately. And then she kept trying to write it. But almost her husband was a producer, so without really paying attention, he started signing a document that sort of meant she was his writing partner and he was the producing partner. And he was such a sort of sweet, kind of a doorman guy that he just never sort of dealt with it. And he brought on his producer. And for like 15 years, these people fought and were practically in lawsuit, and they tried to get finance, but they hated each other, but they were all like partners in the thing. So then they brought on this team of directors, then they found a financier producer, and the financier producer, got money for us, and that's the only one we really need. That's $5 million. She only got $5 million. You don't need any producers at a $5 million level, except for the one that's going to get you the money, unless you really like working with that person. And all these two guys did, these two writers did, they sat every single day and complained about the decisions the directors are making, how it was varying from the script, which they had been fighting about for 15 years. It's a miracle. We just sold to Toronto, but it was like, it was a miracle that the film got finished. It was the whole, they were, and all they did was complain about, I didn't like that, I don't like this actress, you cast the wrong person, her performance wasn't very good. It was just insane.
So they go on your list of team players that you want to work with again, right?
Well, I think in the studio system, there are all these people. Stephen was talking about studio films and applying business school models to film. And it's like there's a whole group of people who got paid to have good taste and to be someone who would sort of wax and wane, artistically about a project. And I think if those same producers, those same two producers and their two writers had raised $40 million or $20 million for the film, they had every right to have their input heard. But $5 million, you have to rely on the director and just say, how do we make this as easy as possible? Because it's all about their relationships. And unfortunately, $5 million in New York City is an incredibly low budget film. So I know, right?
Have any more questions about?
Well, changing gears.
Oh, that's cool.
A specific question for you.
Sure.
How are you supposed to pay SAG talent, in terms of like business structure and just, I'm talking about SAG indie short film.
Sure. Well, if it's a SAG indie short,
Well, I know you can defer.
yeah, right, I was gonna say, exactly. You know, I mean, because there's various tiers of low-budget contracts that are available through the SAG-AFTRA. The top end of the low budget is like 2.25 million, which again sounds like who would possibly? I mean, I'm sure one of you are going, God, if I could $2.25 million,
I'm always like, rats, we don't qualify for low budget.
Yeah. But you know, basically, the bottom line is that if you're hiring a union performer, you have to pay them as an employee.